that way, but let's start working. Warm welcome to our Sustainable Tairāwhiti meeting this morning. I am going to ask Councillor Ria to open with Karakia for us. Thank you.
Morena tāpura. Noi tātou. E te atua arahina mai mātou I roto I ngā kaupapa hurua kei nui a mātou I tēnei rā. Kia whai mātou I etahi ara hei whakanui, hei koha atu, hei hua mā te Tairāwhiti a mā tātou katoa. Ka tukua tēnei I noi atu kia koe runga I te ingoa o tautama o ihu kraiti. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. Okay, let's get some glasses on. Welcome to our meeting this morning. Apologies, I have an apology from Councillor Tibble. Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Parata. All in favour? Carried. Any declarations of interest? Councillor
Foster. With the local alcohol policy of sensitive sites, I'm in the CBD building owner.
Thank you. You've got that, Sally? Yep. If you remember, as we move through this paper, if you remember anything, please, it is on you to have it noted. Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
I think I do, I'm not sure, but in the same sensitive sites, Tairāwhiti Kanarahi Trust has done a submission, and I'm chair of that trust.
I am comfortable for both of you to take part in the discussion. Okay, let's move to our minutes, which is on page 4. This was sent out by the lovely Dee a long time ago. Everyone had the opportunity to take a look. I'm happy to move the minutes as a true record. Seconded by Councillor Telfer. If there are no questions of clarity or accuracy, all in favour? Carried. Before I move on, welcome to our commissioners, Sarah and Alan. I did see you and I was going to welcome you and then I forgot. Warm welcome, and also to Jean online. Councillor Parata.
Oh, sorry, I only just noticed that I am both present and an apology in the minutes.
Cool. Sally, can you tidy that up? Thank you. Perfect. Then we've got our work schedule. Okay, councillors, I'm going to take us to our first paper of the day, which is our sensitive sites adoption. Makarand. Welcome. So, councillors, you will be aware, this is what we've asked staff to take a look at. Jocelyn, do you want to open the floor for us or Makarand? I'll leave it up to you, then I'm opening it up for questions. Good morning. Before we start, warmest of welcome to Jocelyn Allen, who is taking over from Joe Noble. It is lovely to have you on board, Jocelyn. Thank you. I know you've worked with the team and we look forward to working with you. Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Morena tātou, everyone. I look forward to working with you all. So following the Sustainable Tairāwhiti meeting held on the 26th of February, the committee adopted a statement of proposal to consult on 2 options for a targeted review of Clause 1 of Te Kaupapa Waipirawarohe o Te Tairāwhiti 2024, the local alcohol policy, specifically with relation to the sensitive sites provisions. Consultation was carried out using a special consultative process between the 28th of February and the 28th of March. On the 29th of April, a hearings panel convened to receive and consider the submissions which were received throughout that consultation, and a total of 9 submitters chose to be heard, as well as an additional walk-in attendee from the New Zealand Police, who provided verbal comments. So the hearings panel deliberated on the matter immediately following the hearing. And the 2 options under consideration were firstly to retain Clause 3 of the policy with minor wording improvements, or option 2, which was to amend Clause 3.1 to exempt new license applications within the Central Business District and to enable the District Licensing Committee to consider exemptions outside of the Central Business District. district. After considering all the written and verbal submissions, the hearings panel has recommended the adoption of option 2. So this report speaks to that recommendation, and today it is the opportunity for this committee to consider the hearing panel's recommendation and deliberate on the matter once again. I do want to acknowledge Makaran, who has been instrumental in this process and can answer any technical questions. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you for that. Okay, do you want me to open the floor, or will we ask some of our committee members to speak first? Eddie, do you want to give it a go?
Yes, I was on the Bylaws Committee on the day. I believe when this rule came in, it was never intended for the CBD. So it's what I sort of see as an unintended consequence. And I think on the hearing, during the hearings, it was sort of implied that any bar is detrimental to Gisborne and significantly increases alcohol harm, where I sort of look at places like Tahu, and I think places like that actually benefit Gisborne as a whole, actually a benefit to Gisborne as a whole, and they don't significantly increase alcohol harm. I think they are actually positive for Gisborne. I look at places like the TAV, which has got the church and the hospital nearby, and it probably complements the hospital, because I've been to the hospital and then met people at the TAV for a feed, so it's not detrimental, it actually complements, and I think they can coexist. So I'm in favour of our decision. I'd like to move this. Thanks.
You've moved that? Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. I was also on the hearing committee for this kaupapa. I heard every submitter, and I understand why my alcohol is caused in our region. I agree actually with all of the submitters. I'm really well placed to speak on this subject. I grew up with alcohol addiction in my home. I've seen the devastating impact of addiction all around the place. I also have travelled the path of alcohol addiction and the road to sobriety, and a side note, I haven't had alcohol for 15 years now. I note there was a lot of emotion surrounding the school and the bar that could not open. However, the hearing exposed a gigantic problem here. We have an addiction problem. We have a massive need for an addiction centre. But this is not something council can provide. My hope is that we can harness the energy and the passion that we heard from submitters and work together to make central government, especially the health sector, see our dire situation. We need expanding access to treatment services and to address the root causes, which are poverty, trauma and lack of opportunity. This proposed change to our sensitive sites in the CBD, in my mind, is going to do nothing to solve the alcohol addiction problem here, or drug addiction problem here. In fact, it has the potential to boost our CBD, to improve our economy and to go towards addressing poverty and the lack of opportunities, a couple of the root causes of addiction. Just a couple of points to consider, that when this bylaw was made in 2018, we had a very different Gisborne. We should remember this bylaw can be changed in the future if the need is there. We're talking about our CBD, our central business district, where businesses go to do business. Lastly, I will second the recommendation because I know 100% the people who voted me onto this council also support this recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to speak next because I was on the committee, and then I'm going to do Aubrey, Rawinia, Ani. So we were asked, way back, we introduced the sensitive sites, and like Councillor Thompson indicated, down the track it had some unintended consequences. This council asked our team to, on top of what we did, again go and take a look at the sensitive sites. When there was early consultation with the community, it was clear that people can see the reason behind us originally having the sensitive sites, but also agreeing that there might be unintended consequences. And the levers we are trying to pull, like Councillor Gregory said, are not the levers that are addressing the real issues we are dealing with. And I recall Councillor Ria and Councillor Parata at that hearing, because it's stuck in my mind, saying if we don't have places where good examples can be set, or where our young ones can go out, and I think at that discussion also, we agreed that a huge piece of harm was done not so much on site, but people picking up alcohol from off-site, is off-site the right word? Off-license, and then taking that to a garage or a home. Like Councillor Gregory said, and I really respect what you shared with us this morning, there is an issue in our community. The lever for sensitive sites, I firmly believe, is not the lever that will address the issues we have. We need a collaborative health, mental health, government approach, which will change the drinking culture. What we are saying, especially the CBD, with us redeveloping the CBD, is an area where those activities fit. So that is why I also support option 2. So now you've heard from the committee members. Councillor... Oh, Ani, apologies. Oh my goodness. I apologise so badly. Councillor Pahuru Huriwai, and then we move over this side. Please accept my apology.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship. I too was sat on the hearing committee and heard all of the submissions and read the submissions.
Maybe just turn down the phone first. Just a reminder, everyone, just turn your phones down. Councillor, start again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I was on the hearings committee and heard all of the presentations that day, the submissions that day, and listened intently to our whanaunga who came and spoke around alcohol harm, and also in regards to our demographics. 54% of the Tairāwhiti is Māori, and the impact that alcohol has had since the arrival of Cook, and the statistics that continue to plague us today. Thank you, Councillor Gregory, for sharing your experiences as well, and that's, we see that everywhere here in the Tairāwhiti. I too can see both sides. One of the points that was raised quite a lot was our iwi partners want to be engaged in any conversations that happen around this space. And so, and also the focus was on tamariki and the role models that they see around, in and around them in the CBD. I also had an issue with the fact that we talk about a vibrant CBD, and vibrant and alcohol seem to be used in sort of the same context. I'd like to see some examples in our CBD that don't revolve around alcohol that make our city vibrant. I don't think there's enough discussion around what can a vibrant city look like without needing to bring alcohol into the conversation. So I can definitely see both sides of the coin, but I am in favour of option 1 for the reasons stated by those who submitted that day as well.
Thank you, Councillor Pahuru-Huriwai. We now move to Councillor Ria. Kia ora.
Thank you, Worship, and kia ora te whānau, and I'm going to stand because I lost a little bit of sleep over this paper last night. So I want to start at the description of a CBD as the primary business and commercial centre of a city, the hub of all major commercial activity in the city, including corporate, retail and financial institutions. A CBD is the key to unlocking regional productivity, innovation and investment. There is no other area in our region that caters specifically for these types of activities. So I believe that any bylaws which relate specifically to the CBD must support the growth and regional productivity of those activities. Alcohol-related harm, I don't believe is caused by business. I believe it's caused by individuals. In saying that, I totally agreed to everything the submitters wrote from both sides of the fence.
Nothing is wrong.
Yeah, nothing is wrong in all of those submissions. Where I do have an issue is that council planning allowed for the kura to go to its current position.
I'm just going to interrupt you right there. I'm not going to allow people to talk about specific stuff. So touch on it.
Yeah.
We are talking about a whole policy here. So touch on it, but I need you to stick to a higher level.
I am actually going to request an amendment to the recommendation so it concerns what I'm about to say. So does that,
No,
how does that then?
It's already been moved and seconded.
So I cannot make a recommendation even though it was first, I just want to make that very clear, even though it was firsted and seconded by members of the committee.
You can if it fails.
if it fails,
If it fails.
if I put it in and fail, is that correct? Where's James?
That is correct.
That is correct.
And it fails,
Yeah. Then you can make an amendment.
Okay.
But you can also say what that amendment would be.
Yes. Okay. So, I'm just a little bit stuck now because I don't know how to address my issue without referring specifically to
You
the
can. I just need you to be, everyone to be mindful. We're not talking about a specific issue here today. We're talking about a sensitive sites policy.
Yeah.
So feel free to mention it, but everyone just be mindful. We are talking here about principle more of what we want to achieve.
Okay. Just give me a minute to rephrase what I was going to say.
Say what you want to say. I will interrupt if I think it needs to be interrupted.
Okay. So I am in support of option 2. I want to say that firstly. I am in support of option 2. I'm also of the understanding that Hawaii Hau itself has been offered an opportunity to move to the Cobham school site, which is a great opportunity for them. I would like us to possibly consider that protection stays around that specific site until the school is moved. It allows us to push the intention of the option 2 through to pass, but give a temporary protection of the kura while it's in transition to move to its site at Cobham School.
I cannot possibly comment on that. Jocelyn, what is being asked, is it even a... Because, so just the devil's advocate for me, we are now talking about something which is not part of the paper, but what if the school moves in 3 years' time? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we need to be mindful also. I need us to know. This is a total different discussion to be had. We need to stick to this. We're talking about option 1 or option 2. That is a discussion to be had.
Okay, cool. But I'm glad I did get the opportunity to voice that. I'm glad I did get that. Even though I was a little bit off track there, I am glad that I got the opportunity to voice it, because I really do feel, because as a past teacher as well, I totally support the arguments that were put forward in order of the protection of your students and your kura and the values of any kura, any learning establishment. And I do feel much aroha for them in the position that they're in. But I do also absolutely support option 2. I do believe it is the best option for our CBD, for its growth. I refer back to visits to Hastings, Taupō, Rotorua, and those hubs of cafes and restaurants, and those are amazing hubs. They generate so much economy, they generate so much foot traffic, they add to retail within those areas, and so for those reasons I am in support of option 2. Kia ora.
You next.
Tēnā tātou. What did I want to say? I too have seen lots of alcohol abuse in my own life. I see it around me. I see how it affects families, I see how it affects individuals, and I too believe that it is a cultural and personal issue and journey. We as a region have a problem. We do have a problem. But that is not a problem for council to fix. That is a problem for the public service to invest in. And I think it's really important for us at this table and for our constituents to understand that we are part of the puzzle, not the answer for everything. Our job is to ensure that we govern the region and what's best for the region. And right now, with all of the things that are happening, considering that we are in recovery and for a long time there's been significant underinvestment in our CBD, in our region, it doesn't make sense to hold us back further. So to be clear, I understand that we've got concerns around alcohol, but the CBD is the place for hospitality. If we do not encourage hospitality, we're holding ourselves back economically, we're holding ourselves back from thriving, we're holding actually rangatahi back. They want to be in establishments one day, and if we do not provide them with establishments and places to learn how to be outside, how to be in public, we are not setting them up for the world. If you cannot do it here at home, trust me, you cannot do it anywhere else. And that's not good. So I am in favour of option 2. I'm compassionate to the issues facing our CBD at the moment, but again, I look at the public service and say, that's an issue you should have sorted. The public service is responsible for the issue that we're all not talking about. And therefore, that's for them to sort. It's for us to think about the CBD. So I'm in favour of option 2. Also knowing that when we talk about hospitality, there are rules around alcohol that control it. Unlike off licenses. So there are rules around time you can sell, who you can sell to, how inebriated they are, behaviour. There are all these things that put protections. It is unlikely during the hours of school, Monday to Friday, that anything bad is going to happen during daylight hours that kids are in school. So I just want to say that. But I do acknowledge everyone that sent their kōrero in. I think further discussions can and should happen at our regional leadership's tables around addiction, mental health services, support for dealing with issues, but that is not a conversation for this table, and therefore I support option 2.
So councillors, do you want me to run standing orders and ask people who want to speak against? So I've already had 5 people speak for it. I'm more than happy, because I knew it was a contentious issue, that people might want to speak. I'm easy either way. I'm asking for your guidance. If you can show me your hand now, if you wish to speak for or against, I can take a little look-see. Okay, that's all good. So I'm going to cut it off then. Councillor Tairāwhiti, Councillor Foster and Councillor Tupara. Ka pai? Thank you. Okay, let's go Councillor Foster, then Councillor Tairāwhiti and then Councillor Tupara, and then I am going to put the motion.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Obviously support option 2. With the sensitive site policy that we have at the moment has stifled our CBD. That is really, because of one incident that has happened, it has actually stopped confidence of hospitality to move into our CBD. So, and it was used externally as the tool to stifle the possibility of what was going to eventuate and what was already there previously for the last 15 to 20 years. So, you know, we're on this journey because of that reason. That was the root cause of it, why this whole topic came up. And the sensitive sites, when you look at it, is not an area for a CBD. We want to consolidate our CBD, and sensitive sites can work outside the CBD within 50 metres, whatever. But the CBD is for retail, it's for business, and it's for hospitality and inner city living. Those four categories will stimulate our CBD. Without any of those, it'll suffer. So, you know, yeah, I'm pretty passionate about the journey that this has been on, because it's been a long journey, and unfortunately there's been some great suffering, and it has hurt our CBD immensely. So I just want to get on and move on and open up the door so people can invest in a CBD and do what a CBD is all about.
Thank you. Councillor Tairāwhiti.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favour of option 2, and I think, you know, if we look at this, I moved to this area 24 years ago, and I remember talk about revitalisation of the CBD back then. And here we are sitting here a quarter of a century later. We need to get on with it, otherwise we are losing people out of this district that we need to be here. And I'm talking young, vibrant people. So I'm totally in support of this, but I also just want everyone to make note of this has come about by a policy that's created unintended consequences. So I think we need to really, really think about a lot of the policies that we make. Some of them are fine at the time, but look what the unintended consequences are, because otherwise we end up going down a hole that we don't want to be in. So totally in support. I've actually been down there and been for a walk through with Diane and had a look at the plans and what they're looking at doing. And I encourage every councillor to get down there and go and do that. It really brings home the possibilities of achieving some things, some quick fixes really quickly at a relatively low cost. So this is one piece of the jigsaw puzzle we need to fix, and so I'm totally in support of option 2.
Councillor Tupara.
Wish I had something stronger. I'm going to oppose option 2. I'm in favour of option 1. Alcohol has been a weapon, a colonial weapon against Indigenous peoples around the world. And the best thing this council did was make this policy come forward with sites that are sensitive to its community. And our Māori community has suffered from the use of alcohol since alcohol arrived. It was used as a weapon to take their land. It was used as a weapon to create addiction amongst them. And enough is enough. And the submitters for this, most of the submitters in support of option 1 were Māori, were iwi, who have decided that we've had enough of alcohol. One of the weapons of the use of alcohol is to make it economic, to make it commercial, to put a financial tab which further suppresses the Indigenous people of this place. It's in our CBD, it's in the heart of our community. It's got money wrapped around it. It needs to stay there. It is the heartbeat of what makes our community. That is totally wrong. That is totally wrong. That all the arguments for option 2 is based on commercial return on the suffering of Māori people. Alcohol kills directly 1,000 people in this country every year. And we're making it the heart of who we are. We go to other places and visit Hastings and Rotorua, and those are the hearts. That's how entrenched alcohol is. The poison of that is entrenched. And that was the colonial scheme right from the very beginning. And this is our only chance to say, we'll push back. And I would like to hope that I can change the minds of those around here to push back. To push back and say to our community, option 1 helps us take one little step, a small step, in changing the way we think the heart of our community should look. Yes, go out and have dinner. Yes, go out and enjoy yourself in town. But why put alcohol in that enjoyment? Why continue on the suppression of this community? Because we can make money out of alcohol. Because we need alcohol to enjoy our lives. And we can do it in moderation, we can control it. We're in control of that. That's, dare I say, BS. Because we have never been in control of alcohol. That's why we have policy after policy from council to council, because alcohol is out of control. That's why we're having this discussion. And it always has been. It always has been. When my tipuna had to come to town to settle their land dealings in the Māori Land Court. While they were here in the CBD waiting for their turn in the land court, they got drunk. They got drunk, they went to the land court and they lost their land. They got drunk, they couldn't pay their bar bills, the bar got their land. And I hope that this council's got the guts to say, we do have a part. We can't leave it to the guys in Wellington. Because what have they done? They've done bugger all too. So we're going to let them take over our place? I'm going to say, absolutely not. Thank you. Oh my God, water's not enough today.
Maybe you need a drink.
I absolutely do. And that's how entrenched it is. We can have a laugh about it. It's humour, it's a joke. This whole thing is a joke.
I'm going to ask Councillor Older, when I ask, put your hand up, please do it. But yes, you can have a go.
Thank you. I too sat in on the hearings this week, and I also sat in the hearings nearly a year ago. It's not a numbers game, it's not a count the votes issue, but if you incorporated the last year's numbers, the numbers would be well in favour of allowing the putting the sensitive sites out of the CBD. One of the ridiculous things about this 150 metre rule is you can be 151 metres away and suddenly it's all right. But come on, you know. And yes, we have an alcohol problem, and I put my hand up to try and counter Councillor Tupara, but I've never heard such beautiful words spoken about an issue in council today, and I can't add to it, but I'm definitely opting to.
Anyone else who didn't put their hand up who would like to speak? Councillor Thompson, would you like a right of reply as you moved the paper? You don't have to take it, you can if you want to.
No, I think everything's been said. It's just unfortunate how things have sort of ended up. But yeah, I think the main thing, this policy isn't the avenue for addressing alcohol or no alcohol. Alcohol harm. I don't even drink. I've been drunk for 8, 9 years. But yeah, this isn't the avenue to address it. This isn't that.
Okay, the recommendations are on page 9 of 271. So there is amendments attached. So it will have public notification, minor adjustments. All good? I've got a mover in Councillor Thompson, seconded in Councillor Gregory. All in favour? Contrary? Thank you.
Could I have that noted, your wish? Thank you, Mike.
Okay, we're moving on to our next paper, which is the big paper. Take a little look. We're on page 55, councillors. Going, everyone ready? Hi Shane, welcome. Okay, so this is a huge piece of work which has been going for a long time. Jocelyn, can I hand over to you and Shane to talk to us about this report, and then once we have nice basis, we can then open for questions and take it from there. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning. So today we are seeking this committee's endorsement of the urban plan change to be sent to our treaty partners for feedback in accordance with our responsibilities of Schedule 1 of the Resource Management Act. And also, I'd like to note that several recommendations were made by our City Centre revitalization team, who are here today. Good morning. And these have been tabled today, and a copy was circulated to you all yesterday. So I do want to acknowledge our municipal planner, Shane, a tremendous amount of work in this space. And we'll hand over to you.
Thank you. First thing I wanted to note, so I'll take the report as read. In the report, page numbers aren't identified, so I put together a table that the committee secretary said she would hand around that identifies the start page in the agenda of each of the chapters. That will be helpful. That wasn't available when the report was prepared because the agenda wasn't put together at all. The second point that I think I need to talk about are the table changes that are to be tabled today. They were changes specifically to the city centre zone chapter.
I'm just going to interrupt you. Councillors, this is a paper that we need to move, that we take into our agenda because it's an amendment. I move that it's part of the agenda, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour? Aye. So you will find this staple that's there as well. Sorry, Shane, just before we go into this paper.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the table document is a revised version of the city centre zone, and the existing city centre chapter is from pages 141 to pages 156 of the agenda. What I did was also put together a table that is in that attachment that identifies the specific objective policy or rule in which comment was made by the city centre revitalisation team and what the response was. Most of the responses were to accept what they had recommended changed, and it resonated some of the discussion at the previous chapter in terms of what the city centre is for, in terms of being a place to live, play, work and for people to visit. And so I will not say too much about that. Will apologise for it coming later. None of the process that has occurred for this urban plan change has been ideal. Our time frame has been fast, and I have likened it many times to flying the plane while you're still building it, and it kind of has felt like that all the way through. We've done our best to get to a point where it is something that that the council is happy with and that we can send to iwi. I do note that in the attachment I added some definitions that were material to the city centre zone, and that in relation to what is considered a retail activity, what is considered a commercial activity, and also the addition of an artisan activity, which we identified as a whole. A couple of other points to note in terms of the committee, both this committee and the Tairāwhiti committee have, for the last 4 months, asked for the team working on this to actually provide some cultural content in terms of Māori housing in particular. We've repeatedly said we weren't able to provide that until we'd completed meaningful engagement with our treaty partners. In this attachment, you will see that the Residential Urban Design Guide, which is intended to be an appendix to the urban plan change, does now include a Māori housing section. That resulted from some meaningful engagement with Mahaki, in which they referred us to a national document that they believe would be relevant for us to refer to and include as at least a starting point so that we have something there. Accepting that there is still no specific content in the body of the plan change itself, and that we are continuing to work with our treaty partners to actually get that. And if this committee endorses the recommendation to send it to our treaty partners, then we will be working with them hand in glove basically through that process to see what we could get and bring back to the council. I will add one other point that I'm hoping Your Worship is happy with me raising it, that just prior to this meeting I had some communication with the commissioners, and they identified a specific issue they had with the form of the plan change proposed, not specifically what is written in the chapters, but how much information we send to iwi authorities. And so I just thought it was relevant that I should raise that to give them an opportunity to respond to that, because it is a point that I think needs to be discussed at this committee. And happy to leave it there and open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Shane. Thank you, Jocelyn. And thank you, Alan and Sarah, for actively being part of our processes. We really, really value your input. And we missed your friendly face, Alan, the other day when Sarah was here in the worst weather ever. But you were smart enough not to travel into our bad weather. I'm happy now to hear from the committee. I just wonder, Alan and Sarah, do you want to share some stuff with us now, or would you be interested first for councillors to ask some questions? Because at the end of the day, I'm interested in how we move this forward in a way, the best possible way. So I'm just testing to see what way would work best. So Alan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to just kick off and perhaps get some of the technical side of things through there. So I do want to start off and on behalf of Commissioner Stevenson as well, and acknowledge the significant work that's gone into the drafting of this plan change. It's moved in a huge direction from when we first saw it a couple of months ago. So we've got no real fundamental concern about the content of what's in the package. We do have some concerns about how the package is put together, but I think we might be able to overcome those issues. And the other issue that we wanted to raise was just some process issue, which I raised with the committee a couple of months ago. So in terms of that, I think the plan change is heading in exactly the right direction that the national direction from government is requiring us to move, particularly around urban growth. So that's looking good. And I just wanted to pick up on the comment Shane made. Both Commissioner Stevenson and I noted there's probably more work to be done in terms of articulating tangata whenua perspectives in the document, but hopefully that process that Shane outlined to you will draw that out more. And we would both like to also commend the work in the Urban Design Guide. I was overwhelmed by how good that was looking, and I accept there is more work to be done on that in terms of translating specific content from that Urban Design Guide into the plan change. But again, I think that will come through the process. So we do just again want to raise some issues about the process around what needs to go to the iwi authorities and what pre-engagement actually is about. We're both clear in our minds that the plan change, the draft and the draft section 32 should both be at the same stage now and available for pre-engagement with iwi. I understand there is some differing legal advice that the council officers have got, and on the basis of that differing legal advice, I'm prepared to let that move forward, and they can rely on that. I just wanted to raise the concern there. We've said it once, we'll say it again, that we think the section 32 at this stage should be pretty well complete, and its update is purely to reflect the response that you get from the iwi authorities. Anyway, that's point number one. Point number two, we talked with Shane just before the meeting about the way in which the package of information and documentation is presented. At the moment, it actually doesn't reflect the draft final proposed version of the plan change. It's still evolving, it's still changing. That does raise some procedural and fairness issues, but again, I think those can be overcome because of the process council is engaging with the iwi partners, and that it's a combination of that pre-notification It's working in partnership and you're working alongside, so that any of the changes that get made in the documentation will be made in that process, which is slightly different to how a lot of councils work. So I understand that it's unclear to us at the moment exactly how zones are being changed, but I understand that will be explained in a descriptive way as the council officers work with the iwi partners. Normally, we would expect to see a pretty well finished document package at this stage to go forward, but that's not quite the case in this situation. So, moving forward, we suggest that there is some explanation around the package of documents, so that it's very clear exactly what council is looking to notify, what's going to be retained, what's new, what's different. Hopefully through that process, then the pre-engagement that's required, a legal requirement under Schedule 4A, will be satisfied. So on that basis, we think the process issues that we've raised are manageable, but we suggest that the package of documents is complete, clear, and well framed so that everybody understands exactly what is being talked to. Apologies for the length of that, Your Worship, but I just wanted to get that onto the table. Again, reiterating no fundamental problem with the content and the direction of the documentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alan. You guys have taken extensive notes. Can I ask for those councillors who are not on our TRMP committee that you can give a 30-second section 32?
Easy, Shane. Easy. 30 seconds.
1 minute.
Just click my watch.
He's going to do the timing.
In simple terms.
In simple terms, section 32.
Section 32 is a section of the Resource Management Act, and it requires council to prepare a report explaining the process that's been undertaken when considering whether a plan change is necessary, and if a plan change is necessary, what form that should take. And that Section 32 report is required to be notified with the plan change when it is notified.
What was the time?
Never been so succinct in 3 seconds.
Here is mud, councillors.
Business case.
Business case.
Yes. Business case for your plan change.
That's all good. Sarah, did you want to have a go, or did Alan and yourself combine your comments, or would you give it a go, and then we'll open to the floor a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have, if it's helpful, popped some handy-dandy notes in the chat, but Alan and I have conferred, and Alan's great recounting of our concerns, not stop or go concerns, but just things that need to be raised from a procedural perspective, totally on point. They reflect what we'd spoken of this morning. It just, if I was to summarise it, it reflects the need for pace and the massive work program the team have been grappling with. They've got to a fantastic state in terms of the nuts and bolts of the plan change material and even the Section 32. Just some tidying up and final editing, I think, required. The process issues are just around that consultation with iwi, because it is a statutory process governed by Schedule 1, Clause 4A. So need to be really clear what you're providing to iwi and really clear about any changes made after things are provided to iwi, particularly in the Section 32. And then, yeah, making sure that iwi, given the demands on their resources for engagement, can get as good a picture as possible of the plan change. We understand it's descriptive at the moment, but a track change version, as Alan said, would be more common. So if there's anything the team can do to make it really clear to the iwi partners, oh goodness, I've now got a wasp and a puppy. Yeah, anyway, that's about it. Okay. Thank you very much.
You go and save yourself. Oh my goodie. Turn the picture off because we would not know if you're okay.
Yeah. Any allergies?
I thank you to both our commissioners, and again, I do want to highlight to those who are not on the committee the wonderful contribution these two make with their extensive knowledge of the RMA process. Councillor Parata is the first one to say how very, very complex these papers are, and it is really an acquired taste. It is a tough process, and I'm really proud that as a council we're proactive to get that specialist voice on there as well to assist us to have best practice. So again, Alan and Sarah, thank you so much for your input, and we really do appreciate it. You guys have taken extensive notes. The stuff that has been said, the stuff that we can incorporate moving forward. There's no real concerns. Okay. Now I'm going to open the floor. I'm going to Councillor Ria, and then Councillor Telfer, and then Councillor Cranston.
Thank you. Thank you. Firstly, thank you team. Thank you team for all of this information. I agree with Councillor Parata. It's hard reading. I've got my head around a few bits and pieces and made a few connections, but I absolutely, in order to really understand this, it's so valuable, the contributions that Alan and Sarah make, and I respect and value their technical expertise in this field, especially in those areas that I wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about sometimes. I just had a couple of just random questions, really. The first one is around, I think it's page 89 for the educational facilities. I just wanted to check that our writing here, where it pertains to the MRZ R7 educational facilities, are these recommendations that we make here in the TRMP, are they supported by currently Ministry of Education guidelines as well in terms of educational facilities? Because what I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want us to make it harder for schools in that they've got one set of rules that they have to follow from a council perspective, and then another set of rules that they would then have to follow from a Ministry of Education perspective. So just to see that there's some sort of alignment there, so that when our schools are creating new educational facilities, that there is some connection between council requirement and Ministry of Education requirement. That was just for that piece.
Sorry, I'm just moving to the page. It was 89?
I think it's 89.
Through you, Madam Chair, the answer is no, they don't reflect what the Ministry of Education want. The TRMP is a set of rules that govern activities that occur within our field of our authority and what's proposed to be controlled. These are set in place in particular zones, and in this case the medium density residential zone. It does permit an educational activity, but it limits it to sites that are large enough to be able to do that, and it also limits it to the number of children you would have there. So this would relate to quite a small activity in that particular zone, given that the medium density residential zone is primarily to provide for medium density residential housing. But what we generally do within zones that are primarily for housing is you allow other activities like educational. So that's why we have some specific limits on student numbers, on size of lots, so that they are based on experience. The type of activity, the size of lot and the number of students can mean that that type of activity can exist there without too many issues with sensitivity with other activities that occur there. So, sorry, that was a long answer, you'll see that. So the answer is no, it doesn't relate, but it isn't intended to relate to what the ministry would require.
Yeah, no, thank you, because then that clears up that, because it does say here between 11 and 20 students, and I was thinking, so what, in the Ministry of Education, educational facility only caters to 20 students.
Yeah.
So thank you for that explanation. My other question was, for the home businesses one on page 205, FUZ R7 home businesses, can I ask why we put so in point A, no more than 2 people who are not permanent residents of a site are employed at any one time. So I suppose I often work from home and have my own home business, so just general interest for people who are in the same predicament as me, who do work from home. Can you give some sort of how come that sort of clause is put in place? So if you run a home business, no more than 2 people who are not permanent residents of the site are employed at any one time. And so this is also pertaining to medium density area A.
It is,
Yep.
yes it is. This, through you, Madam Chair, this is a rule that has traditionally been in place, often called home occupations in older versions of plans, now called home businesses. The standards that are applied here are those that, from experience again, have identified the type of business activity that can function in an existing residential area without causing too much issue. Traditionally here you would have a hairdresser that might have their own chair and another chair where they have someone else coming in. But if you wanted to have a hairdresser that had 4 or 5 chairs, they should be in a business zone. And so the idea is that rather than exclusively keep the residential zones, and in this case the future urban zone, exclusively for residential activities, it generally allows for those smaller business activities like your own to establish there without any issue. And that's because the size of them relating to these hours of operation and what they might entail, that they generally are able to function without too much issue. And I wouldn't say that they always function without too much issue, and the compliance team do get complaints about home businesses that sometimes get too big and they have to say, look, you started off okay, but you got successful and you need to actually move to another place that often is a kind of a start-up place. Yep.
Thank you. Finished. I've got one more question. Oh, it's not really a question, but it's kind of along the lines of what John and Sarah were drawing on in terms of iwi engagement. And that was in the subdivisions, the rules for the subdivisions area, and I'm not even sure if it fits there, but it was just kind of a note that I made, and it was around partnership with iwi by land developers in terms of naming of new subdivisions and streets, to ensure that areas are reflective of the space and the whenua that they are in. So that was just a little side note that I put there, and that, that's
I can comment on that. It isn't a matter that we would have it in the district plan. Council does have a street naming policy, and I haven't read it for some time, but it certainly has criteria on what would be considered when a subdivision is proposing new roads and what process to go through. So I can go back and have a look at it and actually send you a copy of it.
Councillor Telfer. Thank you, Councillor Rio.
Yeah, look, I'd actually like to move the paper and that we progress subject to any changes. And also noted, look, this is a process that we've all talked about, is engagement. Following on from the actual drop-in sessions that were arranged around the district, I attended a few of them, and personally the turnout was pretty minimal. And what we tend to get after the fact is that oh, you know, we didn't know anything about this, or that, and once we come up with this plan, there will be people that say, oh, we didn't agree with that. So I just think that I want to move this and move it forward, but also want an attachment to go to our iwi partners, encouraging them to also emphasise to them that they also need to consult further, because going to iwi partners doesn't necessarily mean that people get the chance to actually have their say. So it's up to them, I think, to actually move it further. Thank you.
And then Larry.
AC, Andy Cranston, and then LF, Larry Foster.
Yeah, thanks for that. It is unfortunate that this is something that we take out to consultation that is really, really complex to read, and I think that's off-putting for a lot of people. I've spent a lot of time on this, and I think there needs to be clarity about rules, general standards, and sort of advice, really. Under rules, it states activities shall comply where relevant with regional and district rules and general standards, and activities shall comply with rules and general standards. But I'm aware of a rule in our TRMP which isn't adhered to, and when I questioned that, it was stated that it's not a rule, even though it's stated in the TRMP as a rule. And the query, when I put it, was that it was a general standard, and then it went to discretion of staff. So that's not clear, because I was involved in the last TRMP review, and even in this one, when people were saying, well, what's this about? And we were saying, well, it's about setting the rules, which is what it is. So then when the rules are set, people expect that that rule is adhered to. So when it's not adhered to, and when I query why it's not adhered to, I get a reply that it's not a rule, it's a general standard, and as a general standard, it can then go to staff discretion. So that's absolutely not clear in the TRMP. Absolutely, there's no clarity there whatsoever. I do note on page 58 that there's a statement that says there's a need to review the matters of discretion and make sure they are fit for purpose. And perhaps that's an attempt to have a look at that, I'm not sure. But yeah, I know you're aware of what I'm speaking about, Shane, and I'm bringing it up again because I'm dissatisfied with the reply I've had, because it's not clear. And it has to be clear to end users. And as an end user, there's no clarity at all that if you read the TRMP, you say, oh, that's stated as a rule, that's that. But when suddenly that's surpassed and things happen against that, then it's kind of a bit of a nonsense to me. So I really think there needs to be some clarity around that, and it will come through the next bit of consultation we have to go at the relevant area. So yeah, so I wouldn't mind some definition around rule, general standard, advice, you know. And I do have something else, and we'll deal with that first.
Certainly, I recall those conversations, and I think the answer that Joe Noble gave, and that I'll just repeat here, is that they are in fact rules. Unless a rule identifies something as a prohibited activity, then at any time, anybody can apply to actually break that rule. And that's what the resource consent process is about. And that's where the staff discretion comes in making the decision whether in that particular case, that particular breach of that rule is something that they are able to approve, and it goes through that process. And so I note your point that you understood it, that it was a general standard. It is a rule, unless it is in your case, I think it was a restricted discretionary activity. And as a restricted discretionary activity, council must receive is required to accept a resource consent to break it on a specific occasion, and then that's where the process comes in terms of the discretion. Council could, at any point, decide that staff should not have discretion for any resource consent, and they would take those delegated authorities off staff. Most council, all councils across New Zealand do delegate authority for the majority of resource consent to staff, and but it is the council's prerogative to do that, and that occurs through the delegations register, and that can occur at any time.
It just sounds a bit strange that the staff advice, if I was coming in to get something done, is here's the rule, but it can be broken. It seems weird.
Yeah, it's just the nature of, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, again, it's the nature of the Resource Management Act that we have in this country, that unless an activity is prohibited, and most plans have very limited prohibited activities. The whole intent of the Resource Management Act was to allow things to occur, or at least allow things to be considered, and that's why most activities are at worst a non-complying activity, and then any matters can be considered, and only very few, I think we have 2 prohibited activities in our existing TRNP, and only when an activity is listed as prohibited are people restricted from even applying to council to break it. All other activities, the other 99.99% of activities, people are allowed at any stage to apply, including a nuclear power station. We could receive and would have to accept a resource consent for a nuclear power station. In that case, the government would probably call that in. The Minister for the Environment has the authority to call in an application that they believe a local authority isn't in a position to make a decision on, and so that would occur there. But I just use that as an absurd example, but that is in fact the nature of the system we have.
Okay. And the other thing, page 248, I just wondered if this was an imposition on council on general service requirements. Reticulated services shall be provided to net area new allotments. Is that on us, on council, to actually do those reticulated services to someone that wants to do a subdivision?
No, that particular rule actually requires a developer to install services within their site, and the reason it says net lot area is often if it didn't say that, developers would provide it to the road end of a right-of-way, and then somebody purchasing the property would have to actually provide and employ someone and pay the money to get the services through. What that rule says is that when you have reticulation in the roadway, the developer is required to connect to that reticulation and to extend the reticulation onto the site to the net area when you've got back lots, or if you've got a front lot, basically they just have it to the front boundary. But the idea, the reason for the word net area is to allow it so that someone doesn't purchase a property and end up having to pay another $20,000 because they have to actually get it down the right of way to the area. They have to actually pay for it to go from where it ends at the end of the right of way to their house, but that's a normal cost that people would expect.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The challenge for council though is getting from the gate to the trickling plant with our ageing infrastructure.
Yeah,
Which, you know, if it's huge development, there could be quite an imposition on us to upgrade.
And that's why, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, that's why we have rules and objectives and policies in the plan that say that you need to consider whether the infrastructure is sufficient to be able to support that particular activity. There is a presumption that if you zone something for an activity, then that the council would actually have services at the capacity to provide for that, but we always have a catch-all that says if someone comes in and in a particular, the end of a reticulated area, if there's not sufficient capacity, then the council would say, I'm sorry, you can't develop to that extent because we don't have the capacity there.
Right, thanks.
Finished?
There's something come up the other day is we were talking about the imposition of forestry into productive land, and when we were looking at urban development, we were looking at the reason it couldn't go out into the productive Poverty Bay flats, and we wanted to not have that. Could we work later on the opposite way with forestry, saying, well, forestry can't come into the productive land? Because we did look at that for urban development, so why can't we do it as a way of restricting forestry getting into the highly productive land? Is that a zoning issue we could look at?
Just through you, Madam Chair, yes, we could do that, and that will be a matter for consideration in the next phase when we do the rural zones. Council would be entirely within their rights to impose a rule that didn't allow it to go onto highly productive land.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and we will be back in 20 minutes. We'll be back at 10:30.
I'll second that.
Rob moved it. Okay, so I next have Councillor Thompson then Councillor Pahuruhuriwai, then Councillor Tupara, and then Councillor Alder. Thank you.
Just got a couple of questions in relation to a bit of clarity on this, but I just wanted to clear our interest because the answer to this clarity affects the property I've just brought, being rural lifestyle. So in this paper, when we're talking about sites, for example, page 94, the site has a minimum net area of 2,000 metres square. Can I just confirm when we're talking about sites, we're talking about land area, land parcels?
Yes, that's correct.
And on page 249, it says water supply within a reticulated surface boundary. And it says sites for any activity that will require water supply shall be provided with connection to council reticulated water system. So if the site's within the reticulated site boundary, you get a service connection from council.
You're required to connect to an existing service. If there is a water supply and the reticulated boundary generally covers the urban area, there's always a requirement that you connect to that.
So part of your property is within the boundary and part of your property is without. What's the story there? You're within it or you're out of it?
Generally, we try not to have those boundaries that don't coincide with property boundaries. If it were the case that you had half in and half out, you do have part of your property that is connected to, that is within the reticulated surface area, so you would be required to connect to that.
Thank you, that's a great answer. Thank you. And I just want to make just comment in support of what Andy said. I sort of, when we're making these rules, it sort of doesn't really make sense to be making these rules and then sort of ignoring them. Like I get, like maybe exceptional circumstances, like you can turn a 2,000 square metre property into 2,000 metre sections, and if your property is 1,998, I get exceptions like that, but this is sort of like an exception which is a general rule and allowed, and it's like we've done this, we've made the rules, and then we're just doing what we like. It's not an exceptional circumstance, or it's just like a as of right. So I sort of it's like, why are we even doing this if we're doing what we want anyway? So just in support of what Andy said, I just don't think that's right. I'm happy with exceptional circumstances, like the example I just gave, but as of right, to just ignore these rules, it just seems, it doesn't sort of seem cricket to me.
I might be able to add a little clarity to the hierarchy of activity statuses. And so what district plans do is they identify as permitted activities those activities that the community have said are no-brainers and should be allowed as a right within the zone, subject to rules like distances to boundaries, daylight planes, parking, those sorts of things. We then have what we call restricted discretionary activities, and those are activities that are identified in the plan as those activities that are probably okay. And so they still require, sorry, I've missed controlled activity, I'll go back to that because that's a bit strange. But restricted discretionary activity, we list those, and those are activities that we identify as probably okay in this location, but we're not really sure because, and we list matters that we restrict the discretion to. And so what the consents planners do when they get that consent is they look at it and go, okay, it is a restricted discretionary activity. When I look at these matters that are listed, is that going to cause an issue in this particular location? And generally those are approved with conditions. We then go to discretionary activities, and those are activities that are identified as they might well be okay. We haven't really thought about this in great detail, and so that's where you have a full discretion to consider any factors that might be an issue why it should be declined. And then the last two are non-complying. Those are activities that we really haven't thought about, or we have thought about and said, these are ones where the words you use, Councillor Thompson, were exceptions. Those are ones where you would go, should we really consider this here, because we've listed it as a non-complying activity, and in most cases we should probably decline that. And that's the process and the thought process and the reporting and thinking that the consents planners go through to come to a reasoned conclusion. And then we have, as I said earlier, prohibited activities. I'll go back, it does confuse things a little bit. Controlled activities are those activities that we consider will be approved, because you can't decline a controlled activity, but there are matters that we think we probably need to put conditions on those particular activities, so therefore we make it a controlled activity. The applicant knows they're going to get it approved, but identifies that they're likely to get some conditions that mean they might be restricted in some ways. So that's the kind of the overall explanation of the whole hierarchy of the resource management system, and hopefully explains why when we're setting these rules, the importance is recognising what criteria of activity status we're given, and that signals to developers whether they're going to have a really hard job or whether they're going to get this one easy and they might expect some conditions. So that's why when you go through and look at what we're proposing here, the important thing is to look at, firstly, you've got those permitted ones, and then you look at the restricted discretionary. And then when we have those restricted discretionary, we have to identify the matters that we consider. And in most cases, it's what standard don't you comply with? That means this is restricted discretionary, and it could be a distance to boundary. And in this case, that's where you would say, okay, the distance to boundary is supposed to be 3 metres to the front boundary. This is 2.9 metres. We don't think that is, well, sorry, I shouldn't have used that example, because in that example, the planners have discretion to go, that is so close, the words that the court uses, de minimis. The non-compliance is so de minimis that we're not even going to require you to go. But if it was 2.5 metres, then the planners would go, is 2.5 metres really going to make a difference in this situation? And if it isn't, they get approval. Sorry, that was long and involved, but it probably might help to understand why many of the activities, most resource consents, I'd have to say, are approved across the country. And that often is because when applicants come into council, they get a really good indication from the consents planners of whether what they're proposing really has a chance of going. And most listening applicants will take the advice, and if it's, look, we can't see where, you're going to have a really hard job actually getting this application, they don't even apply for it, and so you don't have to decline it.
So from that, I take this scenario we're talking about as discretionary or restricted discretionary, not prohibited or non-complying?
Yes, well, I have to look at the plan to see what it's listed. It's clearly listed in what we're proposing, what criteria it would be. And if it is, the one you are talking about, one of the standards is the minimum lot size, and if it's not compliant with that, then it would be restricted discretionary. And consider what the effect of that would be.
Thank you.
All good. Councillor Pahuruhui, why?
Thank you to the team for the work. It's massive, and I don't pretend to even try to understand all the technical stuff. But sorry, I use my outside voice. I really did enjoy the housing guides, and it's got lots of pictures that really resonates with me, and just the language as well. So, and the Māori housing guidance I found really interesting, and especially around the design of eating spaces and keeping tapu and noa separate and those types of things, which I think is it was really cool. Great to see that in the guides. I'm happy to support this going to our iwi partners for consideration. Kia ora.
Awesome. Councillor Tupara.
Just picking up on a couple of points from Sarah, particularly around the need for pace and also the massive amount of work that's needed. And so we're requiring our iwi authorities, however that's defined, to really put a shoulder to this. And along that line, whether or not council is giving due consideration to the resourcing they may need and the support and service that we can offer to them to help them find some pace and in-depth enough deliberation. So I hope that can, you know, I did have a quick look up and see what the iwi authority means in the Act, and I'm not sure whether or not there's a current definition or not, but it seems like an authority that represents the iwi. Yes. And because in reading the report, there's certainly some iwi authorities are identifying there, and there are some omissions as well, particularly whānau Kai and Ngāre ki kai pūtahi, and also a reference to hapu as well. Hapu that would like to have input in it, particularly identifying Ngā Tionione, whānau iwi, Ngāi Tairāwhiti, who have in the past always contributed to our processes as resource management matters come up. And giving an opportunity for some of those other groups, possibly even marae. And again, I'm thinking in the urban area about the Karakia tuatai and people. Just wanted to make that. Thank you. Otherwise, I support and also acknowledge and thank the staff for this massive amount of work that has gone into this.
You go. Thank you for the confidence. In terms of resourcing, we have entered into an agreement with our treaty partners to resource through this process, and we've been communicating with them through our Māori partnership team, both personally through Katerina Maka, who's been doing some sterling work for us, and so in terms of the resourcing, we are making ourselves available during that period anytime they want to meet with us, and encouraging that and providing resources to give them the capacity to be able to respond fully. And I've forgotten about there in terms of
iwi and including
the hapu.
And including, yes, and Katerina has been invaluable as well, and my understanding is she is including all of those groups. Your interpretation of what an iwi authority is very broad in the Act, and so anybody, so we are using the broadest extent that we think is possible at this point. I would say that, and unfortunately Katerina would normally be here, but she's very sick today. I don't know whether, Gene is online, he may want to be able to comment on it.
Kia ora, Jean.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you very much, Shane, for your summary, and through you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, I'm just going to close this door, sorry. It is absolutely a labour of love, and when I think about the journey that we're on as treaty partners, and I think about probably really the point of our role as a treaty partner and what we're attempting to undertake, and I do absolutely agree the sterling work and made by our planning team in their efforts to ensure that we're covering off our treaty responsibilities as best as we can within this particular program of work. And I think it's valuable for the committee to reflect, I think, on our role as a treaty partner and what we are required to undertake and how we undertake that. And I think within that is our responsibility to engage meaningfully with iwi and hapu marae, as Nick's pointed out, as Councillor Tupara's pointed out, and the matters that impact their interests directly, and especially in this instance where decisions shape, I guess, the future use of whenua and taiao. And I can only sort of vouch for our staff in terms of the approach and the commitment that they've made in our attempts to reach out and engage meaningfully, ensure that those pathways for feedback by tangata whenua are made available. And we have certainly taken seriously our duty to create that space. It's important to acknowledge, though, the persistent tension, I guess, between the fast-paced nature of our processes, the requirements that we place on our wider community stakeholders, and in particular, even more so, I think, for our treaty partnership interests and the realities that our partners face within those timeframes and the environment that we're navigating within, I guess. And we will always continue to offer, to Shane's point, the ability to contribute. However, what we do see in work programs such as this is we're often bound by timelines. You know, you will all be aware that we have a local election this year that's really probably governing some of the timeframes that we're working to around having some of these documents and strategies adopted. And so we are up against it, but I think if we reflect on what we're required to do, what Council's required to do as a treaty partner, I think that we are in earnest doing a good job. However, there's a broader environment at play, I think, that allows and actually creates and facilitates the space for that to happen in the most meaningful way possible, which is which acknowledges, I guess, the capacity and the time constraints that we're all navigating. So nothing really further to add, given that the acknowledgement to the work that the team's done and are attempting to do, and that the door's still open for that meaningful engagement and ensuring that that voice comes through and is reflected in as best as we can within the documents that are adopted.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Shane, for the report. Thinking back over the years, it's been like watching an artwork be created. And, you know, at the beginning we saw some sketches, and now there's colour and the thing's starting to really look like a finished document or a finished piece of art. At various times through this work of art or document, we have consulted with our community, and I feel that that has not gone well at all. And that concerns me, that we need to have a better mechanism of consulting through this sort of a process. By law, we have to now hand this over to iwi for their input into it. And I feel we are obliged to do the same with our CBD owners, local businesses, builders, developers, Chamber of Commerce, and with later documents, the farming community. And we have a comms team, and I believe it's got to go out into every email address that we can find. Is that going to happen? Question mark.
Yes, I can. In short, it's too late for that. As the commissioners have said, the stage we're at now, when we send this to iwi authorities, we have no ability to make any material changes other than those that are asked for by iwi authorities. If we were wanting to undertake that step, which in an ideal world we would have completed it done that in more detail, then we would do that, but at this point that's not possible.
Yeah, can we inform them that, can we send it to as many so that they get early warning of what they're doing?
The CEO to respond to that.
Well, they will get through your worship, they will get the opportunity once we send the plan out for consultation and engagement. That is a mechanism within which the
pre-process
stakeholders will get the opportunity to feedback or get to
Okay.
So this is a pre-process, if we can say pre-process, the notification, extensive opportunity for the community to partake.
That's through the
Because it
formal.
is stipulated in the RMA that this is the process. It first go to iwi partners, then goes to
You announced the public. Okay. Thank you.
I don't see any more hands. I have a mover in Councillor Telfer, seconded by Councillor Ria. Alan, Sarah, anything else you would like to add or have questions now that you've heard councillors ask a few questions? I just want to give you the final opportunity if there were some thoughts you wanted to leave with us.
Thank you. Just a minor addition. Sarah and I have got some sort of detailed editing things, but they're of no import. They're just picking up grammar, wording, various things like that. We'll send those through to officers separately.
That is great, because in our recommendation on page 56, it states at option 2, including any amendments. So we will leave it between Shane and yourself to sort that and then send it all. Kapai? All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Hi, Alan and Sarah, thank you for your time on this as well. It is a huge, huge piece of work, so I do again just want to acknowledge you and also the councillors on the committee. It is hard work. So thank you for that. Jocelyn, you and your team, please, Shane, reflect to your teams back that we appreciate what we do and also the rules that we follow and stuff that we have to do and relationships that we need to maintain as well. Thank you for that. Okay, 257 councillors. Charlotte. Oh, you'll be Charlotte. That is just an update for us. It is just a noting report, which we always appreciate because it gives us a snapshot where we're at, what we're doing, and how we're rolling. The floor is yours.
Through your worship. Thank you. Yes, as you mentioned, this is a noting report, and probably really great to have this corridor in where we're sitting, through this fast-paced resource management reform, which we're finding ourselves in. And so the purpose of this report was really to provide an update to the extent that we're able to be involved in terms of information we've received, but also some insights into the opportunities and challenges we see, and what it may look like for our council. So some of you around this table may remember the Renderson report in 2020 when the resource management reform was initiated as a result of the 2017 and 2019 government announcements. And that resulted in the building of 2 separate acts, the Natural Built Environment Act and the Spatial Strategic Planning Act. So the intent there was to repeal and replace the Resource Management Act, which was secured, which became acts of law in August of 2023. But as you can recall, those acts were repealed within 3 months in December of 2023. So I prefaced that conversation with where we're sitting today in some really strong resource management reform that philosophically does change the way we look at resource management in various areas, which I'm really happy to be presenting today. So this government has announced that the Resource Management Act will be replaced and repealed by 2 acts. There's a Planning Act, which ultimately focuses on how land can be used and developed, and then a Natural Environment Act, which focuses on protecting human health and the environment. So some of the big changes that we can see at this stage, as we know, this emanated from a report from the expert advisory group and a subsequent paper from Cabinet, which adopted the majority of the recommendations from the expert advisory group. Some of the big changes include a single plan per region, fewer resource consents and more permitted activities, stronger property rights protections, so councils may be in the situation when they may have to justify rules that affect land value. New national rules, which cover water, biodiversity, and hazards, set environmental limits. A new national compliance monitoring and enforcement entity, which is proposed to be created alongside the development of these bills. So I wanted to really highlight some of the areas where Cabinet did not accept the expert advisory group's panel's recommendations, and most notably is our current treaty clause in Section 8 of the Resource Management Act does compel anyone acting or under the duties, powers and functions of the RMA to take into account the principles of the treaty. And so that the expert advisory group did recommend retaining Section 8, but that will not be carried over when it comes to Cabinet's recommendations. So officials are instead working on a new approach that reflects treaty settlements and the roles of Māori within the new system. But that detail remains very limited, not known. So initial impressions from staff of the new system show that there are potential benefits like greater efficiency and clarity. Who doesn't want that? But staff have also identified some really key challenges and unknowns. So including how our community aspirations and voices can be included with more, with more matters that will be governed at a national level and through national standards. The narrowing of treaty provisions and those potential implications for our treaty partners and our partnerships, a lack of clarity around the compliance and enforcement functions, and how those will be shared and centralized, and what a regional presence will look like, and how the new system may affect our current operational work programs, including the TRMP review, consenting, enforcement, and also the preparation of our long-term plan, which is a big point of discussion and something coming up in the future, in the near future. So the new spatial plans, there are new spatial plans which will be mandatory, and they're intended to guide land use, infrastructure, and environmental management across the region. And while Tairāwhiti already operates under one combined district plan, the new requirements for spatial planning may mean that our current documents, such as the Future Development Strategy and the TRMP, may need some alignment. We're, again, unsure until these bills are developed and start and are introduced to the House. So with regards to Māori participation under the RMA, as you know, we have a range of provisions that allow that enable the meaningful inclusion and partnering with our treaty partners. That includes joint management agreements, the Mana Whakahona Arohe Agreement, which came into existence in 2017 through a major reform. And I'll note here that we've had 3 initiations for Mana Whakahona Arohe recently, which is which is really great, and we look forward to having those conversations. And also really strong consultation obligations. So obviously, while those formal mechanisms are under review, Council's own commitment to partnership through our internal mechanisms such as Te Tiriti Compass will remain unchanged. So, clearly we'll continue to honor that commitment even as we wait for further clarity. Staff will continue to monitor the developments through the local government sector. So we're actively tied into Te Rukahika, who represents the wider sector. And and just try to keep up to date as we move along. The plan is to bring forward advice at the June meeting on potential, on any further adjustment, further announcements and potential program adjustments, particularly regarding the TRMP. Now, Shane, thank you for giving us an activity status overview of resource consents, and probably one of the bigger changes in that implementation and resource consenting. In the new system, what's proposed is actually to get rid of controlled activities and non-complying activities. So there's going to be a much more tiered system and a lot more clarity on what can and cannot be applied for through the resource consent regime. So I guess in final thought, this really does revolutionize how we will how we will do resource management, and thinking about what that might look like internally. Those conversations are happening, and we'll make sure to keep you updated as we move along. Happy to take questions and some people.
Perfect. Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things in there. The environmental limits, some set by councils and some set by government. That's going to be interesting. We always do tend to fight the national standards where they write these standards which they feel are appropriate for the whole country, but they're actually inappropriate for our region. So just hoping that we've got enough power in those discussions to actually benefit our region, rather than getting sort of roped into standards which are appropriate for the rest of the country, but not so much us. So just wondering how those conversations will go. And the other one is the protection of the property values. That's going to be a great source of revenue for lawyers and valuers, I think, because it's about all the discussions we have when someone's got a two-storey house going next door, or a tree coming out, or anything. It's the first port of call. It's going to affect my property value. So yeah, there's going to be some interesting conversations there.
Thank you, Councillor Cranston. So to address your first question, yes, it is one of the the biggest points for submission through the regional sector was, in fact, how do we protect our local voice and our local conditions, in terms of addressing those challenges in a bespoke manner. So it is one of the stronger points through submission, which we hope will be taken into consideration by Cabinet in drafting those bills. And secondly, yes, I agree. The interpretation will be a fundamental part of how we'll be operating with new legislation, and perhaps a whole bunch of case law will have to be created. But no, I totally get your sentiment there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ria.
Thank you, Your Worship. Seeing as it is noting the importance of our staff for the report, and I'd like to move it. I do want to, this is another paper that gives me little nightmares, given that in my other role it is purposed around the revitalisation, regeneration and protection of the natural environment, and an advocate for iwi and hapu partnership, protection and participation. There are some things in here that definitely give me heart palpitations in terms of RMA reform. The information is it is really just quite a broad overview, and there's a few things that, and I know at one point or another I've also had these little discussions with Jean around future engagement under these proposals. So just from the MFE fact sheet of the RMA reform, the RMA meaning over sustainable management purpose can be avoided. That gives me nightmares. How do you avoid sustainable management of resources? The use of the word proportionate when referring to protection and enhancement troubles me deeply for our natural resources, which have already suffered so much in the name of human consumption. No controls on some activities based on the economic concept of externalities or effects relating to land use. That troubles me. National standards for the environment and how people use and engage within that environment troubles me, as we have seen over the course of the cyclone, and what Andy has also brought up, how sensitive and susceptible our land here in Te Tairāwhiti is. For example, the national standard for the weight of trucks that hammer our current roading network is a one-size-fits-all model, which we know has not worked here in Te Tairāwhiti. Both acts are written based on the enjoyment of property rights. They're not actually written for the protection of the environment. They're written for the enjoyment of property rights and national level standardised regulations. It goes on further to state, regional councils will prepare a natural environment plan and district councils are a chapter of a combined district plan. However, this prescriptive nature of the MPD and the NEA seem to discourage us from using what they call sticky exemption pathways under bespoke requirements to meet specific community needs and requirements. It's a little bit terrifying, the national standards. Much of the information that they have already given does lean towards that Māori engagement will be paired back to settled iwi. That unsettled iwi will not have a voice in this law reform, and that hapu will have no voice, zero voice in the reform. It will only go back to settled iwi. So our rohe is in the situation where some iwi are settled and some iwi are not settled. So those unsettled iwi don't even get a look in under the current reforms of this RMA. Finally, given that the treaty principles was squashed, it's appalling that Section 8 of the RMA, which specifically relates to the inclusion of the treaty principles, and given that it was recommended its inclusion by the EAG into the new proposed reform. That's shocking. It's shocking what they're doing to our resource management reform, and it's not any of our staff's fault, but I do, it is going to be a tough. We have made so many good, really meaningful relationships and engagement through kaupapa taia with many of our iwi and hapu partners over the past 18 months. And this throws a real spanner in the works of the direction we have been taking as a council. So my aroha goes out to our kaimahi who have to continue this work and now find how do we continue to honour those relationships that have been made while also staying within the ture of the reform. Kia ora.
Just a point for clarity, if I might. You mentioned in your summary about there's a reference in there to council's impact on various aspects of it, including council's impact on land value. Is land value defined? I suspect that it's a fiscal value, but if it's not clearly defined, it could possibly also include cultural heritage value and council's impact on that value. Am I correct in assuming that?
Through your worship, thank you, Councillor Tupara. That question will have to be left to be unanswered because the draft bills have not been released in terms of creating any definitions at this particular stage. And however, I do talk about the potential risks it does highlight if the interpretation or the definition isn't clearly set out from the outset.
Thank you for that. My other, something which was raised by Councillor Ria, was around a focus going on to iwi who have settled, because there are iwi in our district, and she points out correctly they have not settled. They have not settled because of the processes of the Crown, and not from a lack of desire in themselves to settle, but because they've been held up. And is that if they have already engaged, I'm asking for some clarity, if they are already engaged in settlement but haven't settled, does that include them or include them further because they have registered an engagement and are currently engaging and towards settlement. Are they included in the changes or would they be excluded?
Through your worship, thank you again, Councillor Tupara. Subsequent to the Cabinet paper being released on the 28th of March, the Cabinet was directed to to actually go and work on what, in light of the removal of a general treaty principles clause, actually, what does that look like in terms of the recognition of the treaty and the uniqueness of settlements entered into the Crown with iwi Māori? And that is something that we'll have to keep a really close eye on once those bills are drafted, which are going to be mid this year. So they are working quite fast through the system. But yeah, no, thank you. Something let's continue discussions on that. Thank you. Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Worship. Having worked on the TRMP now for a couple of years and going back to the artwork analogy, we've been sketching the thing from scratch, and it's been frustrating, and I found it frustrating, that we haven't had a template to work with. I'd like to second the paper, in case I forget to later.
Move it, thank you.
Second it. And, you know, reading through it, yes, there are areas that I'm not going to agree with everybody, but the beauty of it is that it is a good painting by numbers start to what we can then put our own local colour in the picture. So it's got a short track, our process. It's going to have all the country's processes more aligned. And yeah, I actually think it's a good document, or it's a good heading. It's a direction that we've been given, and I like it, I accept it, and I agree with all concerns about iwi consultation, but interestingly enough, that's still a bit they're working on. So let's not hang it on that, because they're still working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I have a mover in Councillor Ria, and seconder in Councillor Alder. All in favour? Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you, Jocelyn. Well done. I declare this meeting closed, but do not jump out of your seats in excitement because we're going straight into our workshop on City Centre